No hiding place for corrupt elements in Nigeria, President Buhari reiterates.
Supreme Court adjourns hearing on application to review its judgment on Imo governorship election.
Court restrains INEC from the registering 31 political parties.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the proposed review of privatization of the power sector.
In the last 3 decades, Nigeria's power sector has undergone several changes emanating from reforms targeted at improving service.
Now, in 1988, the then National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, was partially commercialized. And then NEPA itself was unbundled under the Electric Sector Power Reform of 2005, and it then became PHCN. By 2013, another bold attempt to involve the private sector resulted in 11 privatized electricity distribution companies known as DISCOs, the 6 privatized generating companies, GENCOs, as well as the TCN, that's the Transmission Company of Nigeria, which is owned by the government.
And Kingsley, this plan was to open up the sector to competition and a free market. Many issues, however, cropped up thereafter, prompting a review in 2015 that is yet to be implemented.
Well, concerns have been raised with regard to the approach employed in the implementation of the 2013 privatization process, with arguments that it only succeeded in selling off the assets of the country to a few privileged persons. The proponents of this claim also are that investors who were picked during the process were probably not qualified to handle the intricate complexities of the power sector.
This has gradually led to further calls for proper regulation of distribution companies in the area of tariffs and quality of service. Several schools of thought have advanced theories that suggest the need to unravel the complexities in the entire power delivery chain from generation to transmission and distribution, as well as final point of use.
Well, it is also their advice that issues such as tariff increase, estimated billing, low consumer confidence, and other bottlenecks that have adversely affected the power sector should be addressed in a current review being carried out by the National Assembly, precisely the House of Representatives, which has passed the Power Reform Bill, working in conjunction with the Bureau of Public Enterprises and other concerned parties.
Now, what is responsible for the bottlenecks experienced in the country's attempts to privatize its power sector? What impact did the distinctive environmental factors in communities make on the privatization process? And what more can be done to make DISCOs and GENCOs deliver on their mandate, or should they be replaced? This is our focus on Good Morning Nigeria today. Welcome to the show. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome me to the program, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. We are right here at the Abuja headquarters studios. As always, we include complimentary segments, that is newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, here is Chimobi Watanaji with the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Chimobi.
Hello, good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. Good to see you again. And good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari says with the reform agenda being implemented by his administration on open governance, there will be no hiding place for corrupt elements and acts of economic sabotage. Speaking at the passing out parade of the detective inspectors of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the president was clear on the fact that Nigeria is winning the war against corruption.
My aim is to ensure that no government financial transaction is done in secret. Nigeria has been ranked by World Bank as one of the top 10 reforming countries in the world. I assure you that we shall do even better.
Into some security matters, the Algerian Police Authority says all its security expertise and experience in fighting terrorism will be used to support the Nigerian police force to help it overcome the security challenges bedeviling the country. Algeria Police Chief, who doubles as the President, Afripol General Assembly, Khalifa Ounsi, said this when he paid a courtesy visit to the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Abubakar, in his office.
En Afrique, un peu en retard dans ce cadre-là.
The tendency now is to have works together with many countries, and in Africa we have to work more in order to be at this stage.
The only way we can collectively defeat terrorists is by uniting together within the continent, and the umbrella that can bring us together to fight terrorists is the Afripol.
Meanwhile, Borno State government is to establish civil authority in Abadam local government as soon as the area is declared safe by the military. This followed Governor Babagana Umar Zulum's visit to Malam Fatori headquarters of the council to assess level of destruction from where he met with the military formation there.
We have to see things for ourselves. We remain eternally grateful to all of you for all the wonderful job that you have been doing.
And now to other matters. The federal government has reiterated its commitment in ensuring that nothing is left to chance in preventing the deadly coronavirus codenamed COVID-19 from getting into Nigeria. Now, this is the submission of some cabinet members who visited the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport for an on-the-spot assessment of facilities put in place for early detection of the virus among incoming passengers into the country at the airport.
As the airport operator, FAN is monitoring the international situation on the evolving global outbreak of COVID-19 and implementing other supportive preventive activities to improve symptom awareness of the disease among travelers and airport workers, then improve environmental and personal hygiene within the airport and its host community.
To ensure that enough information is given to Nigerians, we've deployed all our platforms to sensitize Nigeria on what this virus is about and what we need to prevent it.
Now, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development and the Nigerian Center for Disease Control are collaborating to end effective response to manage any possible outbreak of diseases in Nigeria. Correspondent Oluseyi Adiabu was at a meeting between the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Sadiya Umar Farouk, and the top management of the agency at the NCDC office. Now, the House of Representatives has called for seriousness on the part of regulators in the aviation industry following recent diversion of international flights scheduled for landing at the Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos to neighboring countries.
Case where somebody else, in fact, they're trying to save your life, and they now divert to another airport. Due to the negligence, assuming that is the case, that is the negligence of another agency. They cannot pay for the negligence of another agency. They can't.
The practice in the aviation industry is such that when the consequence of your action will have to be borne, if the reason for the diversion is caused by fan or the NAMA because of the instrument landing system. First, the passengers would have to go to Ghana or to Abuja. They can't meet any fan or NAMA there.
There's an infraction by the agency in diverting this thing because they did not do what they're supposed to. That's the point you're trying to make.
Now to some judicial matters. The Supreme Court has adjourned till the 2nd of March the application filed by the former governor of Imo State, Mr. Emeka Ihedioha, of People's Democratic Party, seeking a review of its judgment which nullified his election. The court also adjourned to the same date the application of All Progressives Party in Zamfara State, seeking a review of the decision of the court which invalidated the governorship, national and state House of Assembly elections on the grounds that the party failed to conduct legitimate primary elections in line with the Constitution.
That judgment was obtained by fraud, that the appellant in that appeal obtained the judgment by fraud. And in that application, we set out the grounds of fraud.
The review they are asking for is out of this world, because the very election petition and the entire appeals on it died on the 25th of May 2019.
The court itself observed that some of the parties in the matter are not aware. In other words, we are not served, so they are not present here or represented by counsel. So that may go to infringe upon their fundamental right for fair hearing.
So, the Constitution says all courts except the tribunal, they have no originating power to take any matter except it is an appeal from the tribunal.
And still with the judiciary, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has restrained the Independent National Electoral Commission from registering 31 political parties. The political parties were among the 74 whose registrations were withdrawn by INEC on February 6, 2020 due to their alleged poor performance in the 2019 general elections. And that's the news for now. And Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kirian on the proposed review of the privatization of the power sector just after the break. Stay with us.
And thanks for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Now, Kolo Mohammed brings us business news.
Many thanks for having you along. Efforts to expand the experience of peace in Nigeria, stakeholders say, may not be easy, even though it eases life and living. As a peaceful environment ignites sustainable process for financial independence, as investors in micro, small, and medium enterprises will not put their money in chaotic environment. And micro, small, and medium enterprises are the backbone of economies around the globe.
You cannot talk about development without peace. If you do not have peace, you will continue to have poverty. And when you have poverty, there will be unemployment. And when you have unemployment, there's going to be more conflicts. So what we need to do is to ensure that we have peace. With peace, we will have development. Development will bring about prosperity. And prosperity will bring about wealth. And these are the things that make us a great people.
Activities on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange for Tuesday ended negatively as NSE All-Share Index depreciated by 0.08%. Let's now let you see how it went down. That's business news at this time. Good Morning Nigeria continues right after now. I am Kolo Mohammed. Good to have you along.
Many thanks, Kolo, for the business package. Next is newspaper review.
Now let's welcome Bayo Tebi, newspaper reviewer. Bayo, it's good to have you again.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
We have three newspapers here this morning to review. Let's begin with the Daily Sun newspaper. On the right-hand side of the Daily Sun nameplate, it says, "We'll rescue Leah Sharibu. Others, Buhari vows, we won't allow terrorists divide Nigeria," he declares. That story is on page 6. Militants threaten to resume attacks over Supreme Court's verdict on Bayelsa Goba. That's on page 11. And the lead story this morning on Daily Sun newspaper, also rock director killed in Abuja home. Presidency says it's a painful loss. And of course, below the photo story on the front page of the newspaper, we have ex-SGF hits governors, wants states scrapped. Two writers to that, calls them parasites, wasting nation's resources. It's wasteful political statement, NGF replies. It's on page 9. Supreme Court adjourns hearing of Imo Zamfara review cases till March 2nd. That's on page 8. Service chiefs won't be sacked, says federal government. Says Nigeria needs everybody on board. Details on page 9. Tension as insurgents attack Chibok. That's on page 6. Yeah, Kinsley.
Well, Kira, that's the story of Chibok is actually the lead for the Nation newspaper. And it says Boko Haram hits Chibok as fighter jets pound ISWAP. With 2 riders, many killed, houses razed. Buhari promises freedom for Leah on 2nd anniversary. The story continues on page 7. And also there on the front page, it says, FIRS orders deduction of stamp duty, CIT, and others from source. Power devolution and land use threaten constitutional review. And then on the front page also, it says, we are winning war on corruption, says Buhari. Details on page 43. Akume, I did not insult Tortiv. And gunmen demand 30 million naira for 12 passengers. Those passengers were kidnapped somewhere in Kogi. Details on page 5. Then, above the nameplates, 3 doctors arraigned over baby's death. We are not guilty. That's the rider, and the story is on page 4. Visa restriction on Nigerians temporary, according to the U.S., with details on page 43. Coronavirus puts Nigeria at economic risk, and WHO raises the alarm. Details on page 40. And immediately below the nameplate, Nigeria's inflation highest in 22 months. And the State House director killed. That's on page 5. Bayo.
Yes, let's start on that sad note of the death of this assistant director in the State House. Her name is Letitia Dagan, and she was murdered. She was said to have been killed in her apartment after she closed from work about 9 p.m. on Monday, and she was just returned home and found herself in the hands of her killers. She was said to have been tied up to her mattress and set ablaze. The 47-year-old from Plateau was promoted only sometime last year. She was said to be a very friendly and homely person with all her other colleagues. Unfortunately, she was burned in her apartment to death. The Deputy Director Internal Information of the State House, Mr. Atta Essa, confirms this story. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court yesterday had a date to sit on 2 cases, one on Imo and the other about Zamfara. In the case of the Imo State, the application was from Chief Emeka Ehedioha seeking a review of the January 14 judgment which sacked him from office. An adjournment was secured based on the application by his counsel on the grounds that the processes were still being filed. Counsel to Hope Uzodinma and INEC did not oppose that. However, Governor Hope Uzodinma is also said to have filed up another, deposed to another 19-paragraph affidavit in the case of challenging the case of the review by Chief Emeka Ehedioha. He averred that the judgment of the Court of Appeal which was delivered on 21st September 2019, and that of the Supreme Court that was delivered on 14th of February. The affidavit averred that the date to hear the appeal is 60 days and therefore has lapsed. It elapsed by January 17, and he's therefore calling that the case should not be handed. The other case relates to Zamfara State, where the APC primary for the elections, for the general elections, where all the contestants were disqualified. The victory of the APC candidates were disqualified, and apparently the People's Democratic Party benefited from it. The case is to be heard on March 2nd. There was no case, however, has been speculated about the recent development in Bayelsa State. The other court case of interest is the release of a cleric from Zamfara State, Ibrahim, who had been in custody for 3 years over drug trafficking. A joint initiative by the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, the Commissioner of Justice for Zamfara State, as well as the Office of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, were able to present facts that proclaimed the innocence of the cleric Ibrahim, and the Saudi court sitting in Jeddah has discharged and acquitted him. You recall it's similar to the case of the young lady from the Kano State University who had her baggage laden with drugs without her knowledge. And she also was eventually, though it was meant to be on death row, she was also eventually released. Again, those chaps who were responsible for that had already been sent to court in Kano, and they are facing prosecution. They were personnel of the Nigerian Airports Authority.
All right, the Supreme Court adjourns hearing of Imo's on for review cases till March. Does that mean that on that day they are going to make their judgment known, or is that the beginning of the process?
From all indications, it is supposed to be the hearing. I don't know, maybe Kinsley will be able better to advise or suggest what is likely to happen. Before that day, at least, they will file their papers, they will listen to the hearing, the justices will also have had their brief, and then it will be the turn of the justices that are presiding to either deliver judgment on that day or fix a date for the judgment.
It could be two in one.
Yes.
But the most likely is to be a hearing. The parties would have filed their briefs, and their lordships would have had the opportunity of taking a look at those briefs. But it is for the counsel to the parties to now move whatever application they have before their lordships, and their lordships may give a summary decision or indicate that the judgment will be given at a subsequent date and time. Yes, so that's what we should expect. 2nd of March is only a couple of weeks away.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a pretty short month, and so it's only a couple of weeks away. So that's. But there's a story here. It was a feature article, by the way. It's from the Nation newspaper.
Yeah.
We can't immediately upload that on the screen, but I find it worrisome. Assuming the details are confirmed. I mean, this is going to be a very worrisome development. While it's on page 25 of the Nation newspaper. Let me read. It says the headline of the feature article is "Checking Local Rice Adulteration." Now, I will read the intro to the feature, which is, and then also an emphasis taken from the feature itself. Despite efforts to ensure Nigeria becomes self-sufficient in rice production, thereby guaranteeing food security, local producers have raised the alarm that mischief makers are spoiling their efforts, adulterating their products with stones to discredit them.
That is sabotage. The recent development has been that the initial initiative was that they were rebagging some supposed foreign rice into the Nigerian bags. Now the tide is the reverse. They are now adulterating Nigerian rice with stones to discredit them in the market. Something has to be done very quickly.
I'm wondering the possibility of getting that done successfully, because most of the Nigerian rice, they are bagged at different mills. You know, how do they do that? Is it to buy, to trade and rebag and sell? I wonder how, because the elements who are involved in this are not particularly maybe staff of the rice mills here and there that you know, bag this rice. So I'm wondering how they will be able to penetrate and adulterate as much as will affect, you know, the credibility of local rice in Nigeria.
If you are familiar with rice merchants, they have a cone, a small piece of cone that they insert in the bag, and they are able to take away some of the rice to examine what it looks like. They can use that same cone to feed back stones into the bag and then mix them up.
That's right.
Purely, and that is my own guess.
Well, that's the guess, but
that's my own guess. But it is a deliberate sabotage.
That's right. Yeah. Assuming you have 1,000 bags, they don't have to adulterate all the 1,000 bags. All you need will just be some of the bags. And then whoever then purchases it and say, oh, this is Nigerian rice, by the time you take it, you begin to say, oh no, why do we have stones? In the meantime, they have destoners. They also have polishers at the rice mills. I mean, I visited a number of the rice mills, and I saw the destoners. The challenge that we used to have with local rice, I recall this in the 1960s and 70s, was the fact that you spend a great deal of time trying to destone the rice. Yes. But now the technology is available. So it's a pure sabotage now, as it were. And I think that, as you said, Bayo, this is something that the authorities have to take a look at. It's so easy to destroy the business line of local rice producers. I mean, if you don't want to experience having to crack stones with your teeth. You know how painful it can be. Yes. So if you experience it once or twice, you say, look, no, I won't buy this rice again.
The good news is the fact that Nigerians are now in the know that Nigerian rice is destoned and people are buying it. And any efforts to jeopardize the efforts of the local rice manufacturers may not work. So those who are involved in this kind of attitude, they should rethink, because it will not go far. We have already tasted Nigerian rice. We know what it's all about. When it is deliberately adulterated, we as well know. And there's no way foreign rice can be better than what we have.
Certainly
we have known the story of foreign rice.
Yes, Nigerian rice is healthy. I mean, there's no question about that.
And the interesting thing about the Nigerian rice is that there are varieties. What you get from Abakaliki is different from what you get from Badeji here. What you get from Badeji is different from what you get from Kebbi. And the Kebbi and Lagos are collaborating and providing us with lake rice. There are several varieties, and they have their several flavors.
In Enugu, where I come from, what we used to have Uboka rice, and what we call then Ada rice, from Suka area. They tasted differently, They taste differently. Uboka rice, when you buy it, you know exactly it's from there,
Well, there's another interesting development
is that any state, by the way, sorry to interject, I'm not quite sure what the numbers are. There's virtually no state where rice cannot be grown in Nigeria.
Of course.
Presently, yes. And that is why the federal government is encouraging, and the central bank too is supporting any state that is out to embark on that kind of. And the latest development has been that they have rice now of a variety that can grow very rapidly, and they are using 2 seasons. The rainy season and the dry season, for which irrigation can actually be used. And come to think of it, we've already been warned by that as early as February this rains are beginning to set in, and by June, all over the country, rain will have peaked, and there's likely to be flood. There's opportunity also to find a means of storing some of this excess water that can be used for dry season farming.
I know you are itching to take the editorial. Yes. We haven't seen the editorial. These stories about ILS at Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos, I think that we ought to have overcome this at this stage. Because years ago, the challenge was that we didn't have certain kinds of equipment to aid landing, in adverse weather conditions or poor visibility. And then suddenly, for the past week or more, international airlines have been diverting to Ghana, to top up their passengers, and some, of course, have come to Abuja. Lagos Airport, that's Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos, is the country's busiest. That the instrument landing system they have there is said to be Category 2. So if you were going to upgrade it to Category 3, this would be a seamless process. seamless, because you cannot say that you would shun the traffic that flows in at the end so that you can have time, to install the category
let me get
category 3.
The
Yes.
reason for the diversion, is it because of lack of good equipment, right?
ILS, yes.
Or is it because there is a poor visibility in the Lagos area?
No, poor visibility, and ordinarily the instrument landing system should aid you in the poor visibility to land. I mean, when you fly to some international airports, you can see it's so foggy, and yet the aircraft just goes there and then it lands. So it is the ILS that aids it. So visibility was very poor in Lagos, but the ILS could not aid the aircraft, to land. So they had to go to Accra.
I'm just weighing the risk,
No, with the foggy atmosphere we have now, it is obvious that landing can be a challenge. Therefore, if you have the instrument landing facility, then landing will be an ease. But where there is that, the priority of any pilot is the safety of his passengers.
Exactly. That's why I'm going.
Actually, my concern, I recognize what you are saying, but my concern has to do with the management of the ILS.
Changeover.
Yes, of the changeover or replacement. I mean, it's taking the Minister of Aviation to be explaining. There's a NAMA, that's the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency. There is FAN. It is not just sufficient to be collecting the landing and parking fees. You also have to maintain what you have.
Exactly. We don't need to even lack in that. We don't need to lack such
Talking about transportation now, the passengers on the Lagos-Kano narrow gauge services are rejoicing that the services have been restored. However, they are demanding for more coaches on that route, in the sense that there used to be a train service from Ilorin to Kaduna and another one from Offa to Karu that had been stopped. And therefore, they are now saying that the full stretch that is coming should require more coaches. Okay. The good news also is that coaches have now arrived from China. The challenge now is for the Minister of Transportation to get those coaches back onto the rail. 10 of them are made for the Kaduna Abuja train services. But the challenge is to get the trains over.
It's a good news. That shouldn't be a challenge. They can do something about it. They have already arrived. So,
yes.
Okay, now let's go to editorial this morning. Taken from the Punch newspaper. New federal constitution, not a review needed. That's according to the editorial. It says plans to amend the 1999 constitution yet again have begun as the Senate empaneled a 56-member steering committee recently. It is chaired by the Deputy President of the Senate, Ovie Omoagege. This ritual has been performed 4 times in the Fourth Republic, all of which have failed woefully to address the fundamental issues undermining the country's corporate existence. Right.
Well, the issue of a constitution is that a constitution, when it is provided as we have, will eventually have its own challenges, and as time goes on, such constitutions will be amended as time goes on to bring them up to state. But what the editorial is saying, that what we require is not an amendment of the constitution, but completely a review, a completely new constitution. And the argument is that Nigeria is a plural society, and our founding fathers, as far back as 1963, has envisaged that and had foisted onto the nation a federal constitution which was in tune with our plural nature of society. But they are now arguing that what we have now is not a federal constitution, but a military foisted kind of unitary system of constitution. And they are saying that all the tinkering they have done every year in the past 4 years by the succeeding Fourth National Assembly are just cosmetic, and therefore what we require is a completely new constitution.
Obviously, we discussed this sometime last week, issue of constitutional amendment, the necessity for it, and of course, the repeated, amendments that never yielded, the results that we expect. Or, as a matter of fact, the issue of a new one should not really be, discarded completely.
Well, let's see how it goes. All right. Bye, Atoyobi. Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you, too.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with privatization issues of the power sector. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. As a prompt for our conversation this morning, let's listen into this background by our correspondent, Abdul Malik Adio.
The assumption of free market presupposes that the market operates in a competitive environment. This was one of the reasons for the unbundling of the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, that the privatization will increase competition, while competition will improve efficiency. This has, however, not been the case, as the power sector privatization in Nigeria is still lagging behind in delivering electricity to customers as and when needed. Experts say, understanding the complexity in power generation, transmission, distribution, and delivering to the point of use is critical to alleviate the suffering of Nigerians. This is especially so in areas of arbitrary tariff increase without commensurate improvement in service, unavailability of electricity when needed, and fair or estimated billing. The privatization of the country's power sector, generally referenced as the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act of 2013, has over time been commended, but experts say the average customer of electricity in the country has experienced doubt over its ability to change the narratives, despite effort by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission and the Ministry of Power to end what looked for decades of poor service delivery. It is, however, reassuring that the Bureau of Public Enterprise, BPE, says it will review Nigeria's power sector privatization process to remove fundamental laws hindering operations in the sector. Experts say the review should go beyond the elimination of billing challenges, improvement of metering infrastructure, and enthronement of cost-reflective pricing and tariff structure. Though many citizens have expressed doubt about the philosophy that drove privatization in the first place and the model of privatization adopted, should the proposed review of privatization of the power sector enable government restructure ownership and capacity to deliver value to the people? Should the proposed review pay attention to another post-deregulation billing system? Will the proposed review ensure that the owners who do not demonstrate sufficient capacity to operate the facility cede their stake to new investors? These are questions yearning for answers on Good Morning Nigeria.
And of course, the answers will be provided by our guests here in the studio and in Lagos. First, let me introduce the former chairman, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Sam, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
And of course, the head corporate communications, Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, Oyebude Fadibe is here. Is of course the general manager. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
And in our Lagos studio is the associate professor of energy law and head department of jurisprudence and international law, University of Lagos, Yemi Oke. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nigeria, and thanks for having me.
All right, gentlemen, once again, a pleasure to have you on this conversation. Let's begin on the premise that there are manifest challenges with the power sector in Nigeria today, notwithstanding the privatization exercise and the unbundling of NEPA, PHCN, and so on and so forth. But in particular, what has gone wrong with the privatization exercise? The consumers, who are ultimately those who benefit from the program, are not having much joy. Dr. Sam Amadi.
Oh, thank you. I think perhaps this is maybe overbeating issue, but essentially, we expect that some things will be wrong with, or some things may not work when you privatize. The question is, maybe we didn't expect this much to be wrong. First, privatization suggests the starting point is that you don't privatize if your assets are doing well. So the idea that you are privatizing is a signal that these assets are ailing fundamentally, and that's why they are always underpriced all over the world. So like a dumping, because if something is working, why will sell it? Second is that even in the UK and elsewhere, once you privatize, there are going to be some shortcomings. One is that prices are likely to go up than they were before. Whether that escalation is cost reflective or not, they will go up. Two is that there could be short-term losses in terms of, first, revenue to government. That probably depends on that. Of course, government sells it. And what we call economics welfare loss in terms of consumers may not get the kind of protection they have before privatization. But the idea is that when you privatize, therefore, the new investment of capital, technology, and know-how will quickly ramp up improvement that ultimately, in terms of price escalation, you begin to get value. In terms of consumer welfare, they begin to see efficiency. Now, what has happened is that our privatization has not produced those efficiency gains. So, two ways to look at it is, first, from the point of view of model, what did we do wrong? Did we privatize when we came to a certain level of capability? So, you are selling things that are already available, and you expect that once the new guys come, they bring in the magic of the private sector alleged and get things running. So some people argue, and that's my school of thought, that probably this is the right time we should have been privatizing. That probably we should have been more patient to corporatize. The problem is that people say our public sector is thoroughly unreliable. So people don't see how we can reform. But in a much more organized societies, public sector, you can reform, corporatize, commercialize, build up the liquidity and as well as the corporate capability of that company. Then you sell to much more prospective, better investors will come in because the asset makes more sense. And what that means, therefore, is that issues around customer numbers that we're struggling with now, issues around metering that we're struggling with now. So we privatized when metering was below 40 or 40%, which means 60% of our customers didn't have meter. And so what that means is that if we didn't have influx of financing big time, an influx of technological capability big time, you will not drive reasonable improvement. So bottom line, we privatize, in my sense, perhaps without putting in the necessary conditions for that. Two, maybe we should have privatized some. It should have been phased. For example, some discos are better off. Eko and Ikeja has maybe much more prospective market in terms of customer numbers, in terms of commercial consumers, and so they have leeway to move things around. Maybe places like Yola, Enugu, Disco, and others may not have that same level. So if I privatize in a way that we both corporatize, reform. So what we are learning from privatization, what works most is the level of reform in the sector. Not necessarily that private owners come in with the equity. Our privatization was based largely on the idea that government failed, and government failure creates the need for private sector. But we're now seeing that in the private market, market failure could be even more dangerous. What is market failure? Market failure is that even though government is not there, the market can't solve this problem. Liquidity crisis is bedeviling the sector, the level of customer satisfaction is very low, and therefore the level of customer capacity to pay, willingness to pay is low. So we're now tangled between, we need to increase tariff, but who consumer will pay tariff, they have no meter, they're not satisfied. So from an overview, I can say that, look, it's a predictable surprise. Predictable because if you thought carefully, we would have seen that these problems will still resurrect and perhaps compound under private ownership without government, direct control. Now that we have private owners and government is supporting the sector with degrees of financial support.
So many unprofessionals were involved in this unbundling because they had the wherewithal to be there. And that's what Nigerians are saying, that is the crux of the matter, because the complexity of it all, which you have raised, has been compounded, because, of course, we're not dealing with professionals in the discos or JCOs, as the case may be. So what's your take?
Thank you very much. I want to say with profound respect that I don't agree that we don't have professionals. I'm delighted to be sitting in the studio this morning with no less a person than the former chairman of NEC. And if you say we don't have professionals, with profound respect, that's an indictment on NEC itself to say that they didn't do due diligence. But I don't agree at all, because, for instance, my MD is a qualified engineer. On our team, we have a former NEC commissioner who had served in foreign lands. He worked in UK before coming to Nigeria, and he worked in NEC. He didn't work in the power sector in Nigeria before he was recommended to work in NEC. After working in NEC, AEDC found him suitable to work with. My MD had managed the electricity industry of a whole country before. So with profound respect, the issue of non-professional, or that these people are not professional, does not hold water. If anything, they are professional to the core. I have had a quality number of years in the power sector as a corporate communications person. Nobody with all sense of humility will describe me as a non-professional. Now, let's leave that side. I think the...
Sorry, Mr. Falipe, let me just Yes. Let me chip in. Yes. The issue is less of the professional qualification of the players in the sector than the depth of their pockets and the technical expertise that was expected to be imported. That was a gravamen of what we said.
Yes. Now, I will come to that. Whether in terms of the depth of their pocket or the depth of their professional qualification, I still hold the view that those are not the fundamentals. The learned doctor had identified some issue, market failure, government policy, and several other things. I think those should be the focal points. Again, we must understand that we were privatizing such a large entity for the first time in the life of this country. Electricity business is a very sensitive one. It requires a lot of diligence, and even if we had gotten it right from the beginning, ab initio, 6 years down the road is still not enough for us to think that we will get all of the benefits. One of the challenges that we are dealing with in the power sector today is perception and expectation management. Unfortunately, we didn't deal with expectation management sufficiently. We didn't deal with perception management sufficiently before. The impression that a lot of Nigerians, if not all Nigerians, got was that the moment you privatize from day one, electricity will become more available than it was without commensurate investment. And that is impossible. I mean, he said it clearly.
Who was to make that investment?
Let's look at where we are coming from. We got to, electricity is over 100 years in this country. Where was the power sector as at the time of privatization? We were almost at about 1,000 plus megawatts.
No.
At the beginning of the reform.
At the beginning of the reform.
About, let's say, 4,000 or 3,000 something.
4,000, exactly, 3 points.
Yeah, it was more than 1,000. Let's be realistic.
Sorry, sir. I think we should. The intention here.
I'm sorry if I'm not trying to destabilize you, but you just said that perception management, expectation management was a failure because Nigerians thought that once you privatize, power will be available without thinking that there needed to be investment. Yes. So the question is, who was supposed to have made the investment? Once the entities have been privatized.
Fine. The new owners ought to have made the investment. But let us also ask ourselves the question, what was the state of the economy? What were the things that you held constant? There was a time in this country when dollar was about 500 naira to $1. What was the price at the point of private? These are factors that must be taken into consideration before you now say, yes, they were supposed to do invest. For instance, what are the indices that NEC is supposed to take into consideration in tariff review? One of them is the inflation. What was the inflation at that point in time? What is the inflation now? Has it not eroded their own capital? These are factors we should take into consideration. Okay. That is not to say that...
You know what, Mr. Fadikwe? We want to make this conversation very interesting.
Yes.
It's a conversation. You're raising issues of numbers. At the time of privatization, when the new owners took over, the naira wasn't 500 naira to $1.
I said...
Hang on a second. You mentioned the naira. You said there was a time in this country naira was 500 to $1 US dollar. The rate of inflation was single digit in this same economy.
Okay.
Yes. So it was post-recession that we have seen double-digit inflation, and then they climbed up to 500 from where it's now been beaten back to 305 to 1.
Now, I think let's look at this point. I mean, let's look at this issue from this point. Again, this is not something that will happen at the speed of a bullet. It will take a bit of time for all of these processes to take foot and then have effect. Today, we have a situation where we think that, okay, we can run with this kind of situation. Like you rightly said, at the point of privatization or at the point of the reform, inflation was single digit. But then other factors have also happened. That's one. Secondly, I think we must also recognize the fact that as much as customers want electricity, which we do admit, what is the percentage of those who are also willing to pay for this electricity? This is the country where we have a lot of people who are willing to do bypass. This is the same country. You put meters in the place, customers will go there and bypass it. How are you going to recover your revenue? We have enough experience in Abuja electricity. For instance, there is a place within Abuja here where we went there, cleaned up the network, put new meters. Within a month, people went there, bypassed the meter. How do we recover revenue? And it is still from this single source that you can also improve the network. That's one. We must also remember the fact that discos especially are just a revenue collection agent for other members of the value chain. And what do they retain in this money that they collect? They retain only 25% of it.
And that's a quarter.
All right. When I talked about non-professionals, I'm talking about the ownership of the companies involved in this, because there's no possibility of having persons work in an electrical environment without being engineers or electrical engineers, as the case may be. But the point is, the owners of these companies may not be professionals, but because, of course, as Kingsley said, they have deep pockets. That's why they're able to buy the companies, to buy in their way, and they're running it in this country. Look, sir, with due respect, result is the only thing people want to hear about. I know you have some complexity. You have some, policy or whatever, that is not consistent, that could affect what you are doing. But the point is that some persons have had the opportunity of buying up the companies that are running electricity in this country, the value chain and what have you. But the important thing is also to notice that Nigerians are not getting the benefit of that, because before they entered into this business, they must have realized that, one, you have to re-equip, you have to invest, especially in technology, to be able to do that. None of them were forced to key into that when the bundling was on. So the idea is this, that the result is not being felt by Nigerians, and that is the crux of the matter. And that's where I want to bring in Yemioke in Lagos. You have listened to our two guests here in the studio, and I'd like to get your own thoughts on this matter.
Thank you very much. Of course, the gentleman there, Dr. Amadi, but they are known faces and professionals in the industry. My own take, if the power sector was doing well, there honestly wouldn't have been need for us to privatize in the first instance. So privatization in the power sector was as a result of the fact that we had challenges in the sector, and we're still having those challenges. So the privatization exercise in the power sector has failed. Not only has it failed, it has failed woefully, because it hasn't been able to address the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. And the reasons are quite very simple. One, I start from the regulatory challenges. The Electric Power Sector Reforms Act, or Reform Act, was not intended as a law that will operationalize the sector. It was not meant to be the law to govern or eventually regulate the sector. It was meant to midwife sector reforms. So we got it fundamentally wrong when we now rely on that law to run the sector. Two, I've said several times, I see another round of reacquisition and refinancing happening in the power sector before we can start to get it right. Unless and until we have that, we're not going to get the desired result in the sector. There are several reasons for that. I listened to the submission or the position of the gentleman there. Fantastic positions, but the challenge is this. When the power sector was privatized, who bought those entities and how? The privatization of the power sector was nothing. When we talk of transparency, it wasn't done properly. I disagree with the manner of privatization and the timing, just as Dr. Amadi said. We were in a haste to privatize. Those who bought those entities represented to Nigeria as to their technical and financial capabilities. And Nigerian government expected a lot of foreign direct investment, inflow of foreign capital. That never happened. What happened in reality because I witnessed a whole lot of those transactions, was a situation in which those entities approached Nigerian banks to raise money for acquisition financing. Apparently, they had no wherewithal, they had no capacity to bring on board the amount of funds required to reject the power sector. So that signaled the beginning of failure, because they were anticipating recoveries from tariffs and the rest. So then the tariffs became unrealistic because it wouldn't reflect what actually went into production of those megawatts. So for a long time, the Ahmadi regime started struggling with jacking up tariffs or tariff reviews. So tariffs were slightly adjusted, but that didn't solve the problem. And I bet it, if we keep jacking up tariffs forever, it will never address challenges that we are facing in the power sector. And I said, we continue to jack up tariffs up until a level or a situation in which it will now become commercially reasonable to generate electricity through diesel and petrol. So everybody, Nigerians should just boycott the megawatts. They will not consume electricity from the discos and other entities. I said, as structured, there are fundamental errors in the power sector. Of course, I would never be tired of saying that, because it was not intended as a federated structure. The power sector, by the reforms and what you have in the Constitution, the power sector is not supposed to be run as a centralized monopoly. I had the same issue with Dr. Ahmadi while he was there. It is totally wrong and patently unconstitutional to have any NRC regulate off-grid power generation and distribution and generation. Those are constitutional challenges that ought to have been resolved. The law is clear. Until and unless we bring on board state government and other entities to now start to engage off-grid, we're still going to be having the task of generating enough megawatts for distribution. And I'll always try to be to go by way of simple arithmetic. At the forum, I raised a question. If we had followed what the Constitution says, by now, we allow state government, because power is decentralized, power is concurrent under the Constitution, the law is there. Nobody is even contesting that. If in the past 4 years, we had tasked the 774 local governments in Nigeria to generate 1 megawatt per annum. Let's scale it down. Let the 774 local governments in Nigeria generate 1 megawatt every other year. That means in 4 years, each local government in Nigeria will generate 1 megawatt. 4 years, they will generate 2. 2 years, 1, another 2 years, 1, making 2. Let's do the mathematics. Compared to the number of megawatts we're generating as a country. So, no nation will run in the 21st century on federated grid. I see no reason why Lagos, Abuja, Kano will be on a national grid. We can't be talking of a federated grid in the 21st century. I don't want to go into the challenges of the power sector. I definitely know it will fail, because all my predictions, right from day one, written, documented, have come to pass, sadly. And I said, no Nigerian bank will lend money to the power sector. If they do, the CBN should revoke their license, because it will fail. A number of banks had needless exposure to the power sector in terms of lending. Of course, 3 of them went down. And I saw, as then said, at least about 3 or 4 banks will go down the drain. 3 gone already. I'm still suspecting 2. So because no money came in, and the way the sector is being regulated, negative signals are being sent to would-be investors. No foreigner will want to invest in the Nigerian power sector as presently constituted. This goes routinely threatening that their license will be revoked so many regulatory challenges and regulatory somersault and overlaps in the power sector. A lot of challenges. And I felt, well, it's inevitable that we definitely will need to go through another round of reacquisition and refinancing. Let those who are willing with some technologies, with financial wherewithal, as against going to the Nigerian banks to borrow money by way of acquisition, let them go into negotiations and talks with the existing structure.
Okay, Dr. Yabioka, thank you very much there for the points that you have made. Of course, we'll return to you in the course of the conversation. You've touched on regulatory failure, and incidentally, Dr. Sam Amadi is here with us in the studios. He was chairman of the Legislative Regulatory Commission. But of course, you also have some points of congruence with him on the causative factors of the challenges that are arising from the privatized power sector. Dr. Amadi would like to respond to the issues that he has raised.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with the analysis, diagnosis, and as also an academic myself, I understand the approach is taken. First is he's right. That's why I said the design and the implementation had a problem. For example, it was designed that all those who buy this asset will buy with their own fund and borrow to improve assets. Now, at the point, BPE changed the game. And they now acquired with almost 100% borrowed money. Borrowed money from the banks at high tenor. The tenor is short tenor, high interest. So what that means is that they put pressure on them to recover back and pay. So we abandoned the model. Why do we abandon it? Because it's unrealistic. That's what I'm talking about now. I'm against the so-called reacquisition. You know why? The Nigerian electricity market has no attraction today for real investors. So we're going to get them. Who's going to come to a market that is revenue collection and reporting is sometimes less than 20%. Sometimes they have improved, but at the point was less than 20%. What that meant was that it's not a bankable sector. And that's why when they rushed to privatize, went on shows all over the world, the World Bank even told us they'd be shocked if we sold 3. And we sold 11. So what's the magic? The magic is that we stepped down the threshold. And I tell you, when after the privatization, when they sold the assets, or when they announced the bidders, NEC did what we call fit and proper review. The current MD of MBET, Mariam, was part of the team. She led the team. And they looked at all the sector, all the would-be buyers, the preferred bidders. And we said, in the report I sent to the Vice President, that there's nobody here who met the criteria in terms of the financial. You must have $100 million as their own asset. In fact, all the discos, some already have very reliable partnership agreement with the foreign investors. And I sent a letter to the Vice President. He was alarmed. He called a meeting of the PAMSEC, everybody. I said, NEC says, and you know what, when we started the meeting, we discovered that BPE had changed the TOR that we used. Wisely too.
In terms of reference.
Yes, wisely, because they said, the investor says, look, this is too hard for us. So this is it now. We made a political decision to privatize, which was a good idea based on the fact that, like I said, the sectors was failing. To privatize and succeed, we needed to reduce the threshold. Because if you kept the threshold at where we have, like I said, competent means you have the money, maybe the GEs, the Tatas and all that, they're going to come. Because one, if you have customer numbers, up until now they're struggling with verifiable customer number. We wanted to SCADA. TCM doesn't have a SCADA system. So my argument in my book before I became NEC chairman, and when I was NEC chairman, I had a fallout with the sector. The minister of them said, remove some money. I said, I studied privatization. It really works. It works when you have good regulatory environment, good corporate environment, and it depends on the phasing. You see, what drives efficiency is reform, restructuring, and competition. So when you have a private monopoly like you have now, it's difficult. So he is right to say that the guys who came to the board were the best we could get. It's not true that it was not transparent. I think it was largely transparent. I didn't do it, MBET did it, but BPE, but NEC monitored everything.
You're transparent on the basis of the revised terms of reference.
Exactly. On the basis that the people who won it were the people who had the best bid. It's actually wrong and blackmailing to say it was rigged. It wasn't rigged. we didn't get quality bids, and we couldn't have gotten quality bid with the rate of our public policy, the instability. This is the first time we're having policy consistency. So who's going to come and put in that kind of money? And by the way, this sector does not foreclose states from having. I licensed Lagos State. Okay. I was part of the whole thing Lagos did. Fashola, great job we did together. Lagos was able to put island power plant. NEC licensed it. Port Harcourt had an IPP, yes, which is sold to Sahara, I think. Akwa Ibom had. Edo worked some partnership with Azura. So the idea here is, should states have distribution network? Of course they can't. In the sense that it's good to decentralize, but let's be realistic. It's talking about local government with 1 megawatt per year. I don't know where they locate that auction, because it's about $1 million for a megawatt average costing. That's what it is. But back to the critical issue, I think it's right about the fact that we didn't get the design right. And what are the problems we had? First is that too much assumption that the private sector will step in. And he was right about position management. What that means that we sold privatization as a magic bullet. Once you do it, bingo, light everywhere, it wouldn't work. First, you need to create a market. We would have a market. You need to create a corporate. Until I came to the power sector, there was no audited account of NEPA anywhere in history. We did the first one.
What do you mean create a market?
Create a market. See, a market is rule-based, number one, transactional. Today, we are doing power sector without even the bankability of DISCO, PPAs, and vesting contracts are not yet there. So a market is not just that, we can generate power. The protocols, the processes, the coordinations that need the market to drive is not there. Look at TCL up to today. We don't have a board. We don't even have a SCADA system. We thought we would have SCADA before before you privatize, we have had SCADA operation. That means the dispatcher of power will be there and see everything. Today, some power is still stranded. Over 2,000 megawatts, I think, or 3,000, are not being evacuated. Why? Because evacuation failures, these codes don't have capacity to pick power at the place TCN has capacity to drop it. TCN has no power to drop power where these codes can pick it. So these inefficiencies needed structured reform, and government, in my view, has a capacity to bear the losses more than private sector. So when I say we should privatize now, what I meant was that if we were disciplined reform followed through, by now we would have had up to 6,000, 7,000 regular megawatts in the market. Then it becomes
being wheeled, not just
being wheeled and delivered. Then it becomes sensible to ask that the private sector, what is coming now is to push government, don't pay money again. We bring our own money, we run this efficient. So government saves their money, invest in health and education.
I'm just saying, I'm sorry to, it's a curious point, I mean, to any person who is listening to this, that, okay, we are saying that they don't have funds to generate. Our banks keep posting profits. Are these just, as the saying goes, paper profits, or what? Why is at Nigerian banks they can't syndicate loans or syndicate facilities? I will keep here, and that's one leg. Second leg of it, I know that there is capital flight. This is a rhetorical question. So all the big men that say that they are wealthy and they are rich, where's the money?
Good, very good question. The banks actually saved us. Without the banks, we wouldn't have privatized. Because all these people who are saying Disco, Gencos, we are Nigerian banks. At a point, MFL was worried about the risk, systemic risk. That's why he brought it to 231 or 213 billion intervention to be able to help the sector. You see, the power sector can actually cause contagion on the banking sector. You see, the design was, look, come with your money first. That was the idea, which was not possible. I give another example. This man is a Nigerian investor. He goes to you from Korea, science equity partnership or some kind of partnership. Your own is 5%, his own is 95%. He has only $20 million in his account. You have 20 billion. You are Korean electricity. Then he says, use your 20 billion to prove $100 million. Then when it's time for investment, you're not coming. So the failure was that we are not prudential in structuring what works in reality. We didn't look at our situation in the market, and we needed big infusion of funds, finances, and that these banks are over-leveraged already. You therefore cannot expect them to finance metering. Why can't they disclose meter their customers quickly? It's in their own interest to meter. But they need to go and borrow money long time, invest, and recover gradually. None of them want to do that. Therefore, so the crisis is a crisis of mismatch of expectation, poor diagnosis of our situation, and overambitious, politically driven urgency to privatize. This is the right time to privatize, in my view. You would have had government set up the system for bear the risk. Those losses you are afraid to bear, government can bear it because government has interest in public provision of electricity. And then you reform and then corporatize properly. NEPA has board, everybody has board, they are running commercially. Then you use tariff to force them to be competitive, even as government entities. Then you let government off. That's what UK did. Nobody privatizes when you have scarcity, acute scarcity, because the public sector, the private sector is not interested in providing electricity. They're interested in the business and profit of electricity business. It's only government that is interested in providing electricity as a social service. The rest are interested in the profitability. And once they can't see it, they now what they're doing now, no investment, just scream off the little you can get. That's how it works. That's the behavior of
his analysis has said it all. That the failure of whatever arrangement we entered into after the unbundling is as a result of the incapacity on the part of those who body companies and of course lack of investment after I have been giving a go ahead, lack of bankability of the business, which of course was known to those who ventured into the buying of the companies and all of that. The important thing to know this morning is the fact that Nigerians are not getting results. And at this point, I'd like to return to Amadi again, because of course he will leave with us in a moment. What should be the proper thing to do at the moment? How do we reverse the trend? How do we ensure that discos and gencos can become active? Can they go out borrowing? Can they bring in a foreign investment to give them support, because government cannot continue to bear the loss all the time. In oil sector, the same thing now. In a privatized power structure, you also want them to bear the loss. So what should these gencos and other, what should they do?
Yeah, and then please, that's part A of the question. Part B would be as follows. You say that this would have been the right time to privatize. We have already privatized. So what do you do with the already privatized?
Thank you. I think they are ruled together. First, I agree that, first thing to do that, I agree with Yemi that we need to deregulate a little bit. For example, the Act says more than 1 megawatts get a license or permit. We should give up to 10 megawatts. Say you don't need a permit, 5 megawatts, so people can self-generate. Because the market today is going what they call pro-consumer. You produce, you consume. Solar, people put solars on and generate power and sell to the grid, back to the grid. So we should be much more flexible. The grid is changing from big to narrow grid and smart grid. So we can do that. But more importantly is this. Let me warn, we should not be in a hurry to take back this asset from these guys. Why do I say so? The Nigerian political economy is a political economy of rent-seeking and predation. New political guys are coming now to take without any proven capacity to change things. I think when you are in a hole, don't dig. What we should do is to use regulation. NEC has competent people. We should more authorize them. Let us use regulation. For example, let me give you two examples. NEC can give a 6 months window and do peer review benchmark. This is what each of these companies should produce in 6 months. Metering, whatever, losses, frequency of outages and all that. After 6 months, if you fail, NEC will divest you through regulatory process. What that does is that it gives confidence to investors that this is a market rule-based and regulated entity. The answer to the problem is regulation. Don't do a political intervention. Don't say, okay, we have the money, we'll give it back, go away. It kills this sector. We have privatized. Let's stay on privatized. But let's now be smart to find a way. The 40% government has the 40%. Government can sell it to institutional equity, institutional participants who will come and dilute the ownership of these people who don't have the capacity. But if you just throw them away, you've ruined everything. And today, Nigeria needs so much physical challenge. We need to, our public borrowing requirement needs to be less. So therefore, we can't afford government to take back all the sector and roll it. But we can, by regulatory intervention, close down these problems. We keep gradually, again, like I said, patience. We won't get it right in the first 1 month, 3 months. We should see incremental improvement. And they start with better regulation. Give them a job without fanfare, without publicity. Review them. When they're wrong, you ease them out, because the Act allows the regulator, in spite of the transactions, to step in and determine whether you have your capacity to operate a grid. If you can't operate a grid, the regulator can exit you through regulatory process or allow you to expand ownership or bring in other people to improve the asset. We should not scatter again, discontinuity, and then some political grabbing happens again, and then we sit back. I have not seen the prospect of anybody in this country. Dangote, our biggest guy, doesn't want to invest in this sector. He understands why. He understands that this sector is regulated, and in a regulated sector, your profit windfall will not happen. So your pricing, these guys, it can't be so profitable overnight. Second, he understands that this sector has risks that systemic, that requires some level of patience. So government investment to continue, but smart one. Government to create the right, step in right to either help the board get better, put in more skills, improve performance, and to the regulator. I think that's...
Dr. Fadipe, we're going to have to pause you because we're signing off Amadi in the next few minutes. But some of the points that he has raised, I would like Dr. Yemi Oke in Lagos to speak to those points so that if there are any countervailing issues that you have, Amadi can also respond to those issues. Dr. Oke.
Thank you very much. Of course, I disagree to an extent, and I agree to a very large extent with Dr. Amadi. One, I still disagree with Dr. Amadi that he ought not to have licensed Lagos, because Lagos should not have required electricity license from the federal government, because what the Constitution says. So they shouldn't have kept their hand behind their back to go beg Sam for license. So I disagree with him. He knows that. We should encourage states also to come on board, synergize, of course, with the federal government, tap into the pool of experience and knowledge at the level of the NERC. I agree with him to that extent. Two, he's now agree with me as to the proposal or the need to scale down the megawatt regulation. One, let me put it straight. 0 to 5 megawatts should be free generation. 5 to 10 megawatts should be by state and essentially should be off-grid. The NERC should start to worry itself from 10 megawatts and above on-grid. But any form of generation off-grid should go back to state. That is the proposal. Secondly, I totally agree with him that we should not encourage grabbing, because what happened initially was, I call it megawatts grabbing indirectly, people grabbing the assets, GISCOs, GENCOs, and the rest. That should not be allowed. The federal government can divest, as rightly mentioned, its 40% stake to dilute the ownership structure of the DISCOs or GENCOs, as it were. I totally agree with that. Those are fantastic suggestions. But I still don't see, he agreed with me that the sector is not bankable, and it's not as optimistic as to the fact that funds will come from offshore. So that's a challenge. We cannot go via institutional investors locally. Pension funds and all those recovered loans cannot be invested in the power sector. I agree with to that extent. One thing I also need to mention is the fact that we need to now manage consumers' expectation. Nigerians might be tempted to continue bypassing because the issue of metering is still a critical factor. The Abuja regime brought CAPME. I didn't see any reason why government should stop CAPME. CAPME was a kind of credit structure, well thought out, that enables consumers to advance money to procure meters, and that, of course, gets defrayed over time as they consume electricity. But the map that was substituted for CAPME has failed, and has failed woefully. So that to me is taking 2 steps forward and taking 10 backwards. A whole lot of issues. So we need to carefully manage consumer expectation so that they don't resort to desperation, and free up the space. You mentioned it, mini megawatts, mini grid, off grid, disaggregated grid, regional grid, all kinds of grid arrangement. But we should also now focus more on off-grid generation. Let's free the space. Let's be a bit liberal. Let's decentralize the power sector structure. And again, governance and regulator. I would rather, I would appreciate a situation in which we have regulators that can look at the honorable minister and disagree. I mean, the last regime that did that was Amadi. He disagreed with the minister. You know, we all thought he was going to lose his job. We want people who really know what they're doing, who can insist. Unless and until we have a regulator that is independent and firm, ready to even back out if they're not willing to do the right thing, then we probably wouldn't have started. So those are some of the challenges. But of course, I agree with him to an extent, and then I disagree with him to this.
Professor Yemiweke, thank you very much indeed for agreeing and of course disagreeing with Dr. Sandro-Sam. In fact, everything has been laid down. We understand where the problem is coming from, and of course it's very fundamental for Nigeria to make progress in the power sector. A lot really needs to be done from all indications. I want to ask you this, perhaps maybe out of context anyway. Now, Nigeria has just one major source of power, which is hydro. China, for instance, has a major part of electricity from coal. About 66% is coal. And China also has up to 4 or 5 different grids, though they are all synchronized. In fact, in 2016, they were synchronized in 2016. Can that work for us?
Well, first, let's start by saying that, of course, our major supply is from gas turbine, which is about 80. But we have hydro, which we've not used with this new Mambila and others. Probably it will grow. We have great hydro potential, but don't forget that in the past, hydro civil work was too difficult. It has environmental issues, and so many. Even when Akosombo Dam in Accra was big idea, but Nigerian Africans pulled back from hydro development, except like Congo, the big one that had. I think we have potential for that. We also have potential for of multiple grid. You see, my argument is that you must have a national grid, but they can intersect with regional grids, mini grids. Before I left office, we did a work with MAN, which is what we want to do. We want to do off-grid for industrial cluster. The idea was to look at the financial, environmental, technical, and regulatory issues around. Why can't business clusters have their own grid, where they create an SPV and create their own power, self-supply, but in a commercial way, so it's viable. So we can mix everything. Today's electricity grid is technology-based. It's actually artificial intelligence-based. That means it can be flexible. It can have all this interconnect. But back to what okay said, I totally agree with his disagreement. Okay, so to say, he's right. We need to be less intrusive. We should allow greater flexibility, so states can do a lot, provided they do it according to standard, and maybe a standard code regulated by different states, or as the case might be. But the critical issue about customer interest, which we talked about, is the problem here. Anywhere we are privatizing the world, there's always some degree of customer welfare loss. That means prices will go up. Maybe those who can't consume will consume less. So what does government do? That's why in the Act we talk about the Power Assistance Fund. That should have been in before we privatize. So that when prices go up, there's a process of the DISCO themselves doing what they call demand-side management. They try to manage their customer. Some people they give subsidy, some people they use from. So those framework allow customers. So the price is going up, but the poor customer is consuming, especially when you have multi-tiered pricing, so that you have at this level, this price is X. If you consume more, it becomes X plus 1. So if you stay at this level, you enjoy the minus X. If you go up, you get plus X. So those things need to be put in. And by the way, he's right also on the fact that, like I said, please, nothing should cause us to go into public hysteria. It doesn't work. We should look at this problem with some degree of patience and confidence, address them gradually. Sobriety. The idea of kick the bucket. Okay, this discourse failed. Failure is failure. It doesn't matter the factor. They didn't deliver. They didn't deliver their corporate commitment. Okay, government failed. We didn't provide you the environment. It says, okay, fine. We have failed. But what should we now do? We should not sit back and say, what is every problem has a knot, a place where what we call triple dimension. If you hit it, it escalates. The first place now is to find a way to help you people become more capable in technology, in change management and financing. And to do that, you have to lose something. You have to give space, give government some space, because government cannot put in money. I don't subscribe to what I call moral hazard. You put in money, you have no stepping right. You put in money, you have no governance right. So I give you a bailout, give you billions, and then you can sit at home and run it. That is frisbee. That is bad capitalism. What is good one is the government gives you money, government structures incentives, structure sanction within that, so that through the regulatory framework we can be able to control your behavior. The assumption we had, which was fatal.
Sorry, are we thinking along this line? Because part of, to use your expression, the hysteria you have now is privatized power sector has failed. Government should recall the various companies or take over those companies. That's the kind of buzz that you hear.
Going to be, and that's what the politicians will drive. If you look at all these committees, politicians drive grabbing, because it fits into the political economy of power acquisition. If you own these assets, you have a source of funding for your next campaign. But for public good, don't go that way. Go the way of strategic cutback. Use regulation to reform, change behavior of those entities. Anything sort of that is going to be
well, we know that we have to let you go, Dr. Amadi, but just very briefly from you, I mean, you will have to delay yourself anyway if you answer for a much longer time.
Yes.
We've heard about I don't want to use the word intrusion, the advent of Siemens into the power sector. How does all of this ultimately help in improving the sector? Is this just a one-off or a side kick?
It does help, but don't forget that when we were there, we had GE coming also with all kinds of bogus, support system. What you need to tie them down. That's why we make mistake. The regulator should be part of that conversation. What do they want to support? It can give GE a lease to supply 3,000 megawatts of their own. For example, Egypt, I think, or Morocco, one of the Arab countries, had 10,000 megawatts with Siemens. But that's a project. So, okay, Siemens is going to produce. Not Siemens coming to sell equipment to people who don't have the capacity to use them well. Siemens can say, we'll give you 10,000 or 1,000 megawatts. We'll give to them. The government can farm out, go and give us. This is the pricing. This is what you take. Go. You have the equipment, you have the technology, you have the managerial. So if I was in government, I would advise government to farm out production. So, okay, we need 10,000 megawatts in this area. Like, for example, what NNPC is trying to do with American group or so, they signed it a few days ago, to give about 3,500 in Abuja. Give them that kind of, it's like a project. You deliver this project in 2-3 years. This is the pricing. This is what we're supposed to support you. Allow them to develop it. But don't come into a salesman contract where you say, okay, we're going to supply transformers to 5, 10 discos, and they give to them. That's the money is there. The transformer is not connected. They can't pick loads because the systemic the other things you need to do are not there. I think this kind of contract we do with Siemens and GE, sometimes they are against us, is to benefit their salesmanship. Because at the end of the day, they dump this equipment and they're not synchronized. It's better to say, go and give us 10 megawatts, 10,000, your own. We know, when we see the megawatts connected and we know that you have delivered, I think that's the better way to go. But final word on this is that, look, we should trust the regulator, we should trust government, but we should not be hysterical, but we should be radical, we should be measured at the same time, and we should be comprehensive in changing things, but not hysterical. Take nothing away, take nothing back from the people you're giving to, except to have an answer. Otherwise, it creates
a bigger problem. Dr. Amadu, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Of course, you said when you have a good regulatory agency, things will work. Yemi told us that when you were there, you disagreed with the minister at a point, and that's to show that you have to stamp your feet, when you know that you are doing the right thing. So we appreciate you this morning. Thank you indeed. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We will take a short break now. When we get back, we shall be doing the concluding part of today's topic. Stay with us.
Hey, welcome back here. I said Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. Now we have Dr. Yemi Oke, Associate Professor of Energy Law and Head of Department of Jurisprudence and International Law, still with us at our Lagos Network Studios, and right here in the Abuja Studios, Oyebode Fadikpe, who is General Manager, Corporate Communications of Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. Mr. Fadikpe, one clear point that consumers will always talk about, particularly for those who are unmetered, is what they refer to as a menace of estimated billing. They have, nobody has power 24 hours a day. And yet, when the bills come, bills are as crazy as they used to be under NEPA. Why is this lingering? That's one. Second leg of it will also be as follows. What is the challenge for the investors, say discos, in trying to raise capital to buy meters? Because we kept hearing when Fasola was Minister of Power, there were all kinds of measures, all kinds of schemes designed, to facilitate the acquisition and distribution of meters. Yet, there appears to be no succor for the consumers. And they draw analogies sometimes with what you have in the telephone, in the telecoms industry. The service providers are happy for you to buy your credit and use. So why aren't you happy to also get people to buy credit and use?
Well, fine. Two questions. One, the issue of estimated billing, and then two, the issue of metering and why discos have not been able to provide meters. Now, estimated billing, let's also get to know that it's a legal thing. NEC is in charge of that. They gave us a methodology for doing that. But I also know that customers are not happy with it, of course, because they think that what is given to them to pay does not align with the consumption that they may have seen over the month. But look at it from this perspective, because these discos also, now, let me even start by saying, let me go back to a particular point I want to make. There are, for me, from my own study of the power sectors, there are four issues that are dealing with, that we are dealing with or contending with. Dr. Amadi and Professor Yemi Oke have dealt very well with three of them. One, the politics of power supply. Two, the sociology of power supply. Three, the economics of power supply. And four is the technology of power supply. Technology you can readily pick once the money is available and you have the expertise. The politics is a very slippery one, and that is part of the policy framework that has affected us till date. I'm happy that they dealt very, very well with this. Some of the issues that they raised are not things that there are things that are within their competency to deal with. For instance, Dr. Amadi, because of his being a player as a chairman, he had dealt with all those ones. Now, coming to the issue of estimated billing, there are about three people that pay for electricity. One, those who have meters. You can determine what they have consumed and you can bill them accordingly. And they could be postpaid or prepaid meters. Two, those who are on estimated billing. Three, those who are not even on your database at all. Now, unfortunately, and I like to be heard very clearly, unfortunately, it is those who are on your database without meter that get estimated billing that pay for the third set of people. Now, why is it so? We also get metered at the trading points, using discos now as the last leg of the value chain. Generation will meter the transmission company will meter the discos at their trading points, and there is an expected amount that you must bring for the energy that you have received. People have always said you are giving a target, and they have interpreted that word target wrongly. The meaning of target for the power sector is that you get 10 megawatts of energy from transmission, and you are expected to bring back the amount commensurate to 10 megawatts. Otherwise, the balance that you have not paid, we are even paying interest on it. So that again is a policy issue that is also affecting the sector. So estimated billing for now, unfortunately again, will live with us for a little bit of time. And I'm saying a little bit of time because MAP has a definite time frame. 3 years since May last year. So taking the whole of 2020, taking the whole of 2021, and then some part of 2022 to make up the 3 years. We are supposed to have finished metering. That is not to say that customers will still not require meters, because new structures will come up and you will need meters. But for now, within that 3 years, we are supposed to have metered all customers. So for that period, there will still be estimated billing. But government, NEC is doing something. They are trying to put a ceiling on estimated billing that for certain level of, certain categories of customers, you cannot exceed this level. And they righteously so too, because you cannot remove the problem of human error that, okay, look, this customer is likely to be consuming this amount, but is it actually like that? That is where we do load reading or load measurement to see whether the customer is actually consuming that, or you even use a historical factor, or you use what is called grid factor. But all of these ones are pure grammar. The most important thing is that Does the customer think he's paying the right amount for the energy that is receiving? That's one. The second ambit of it, which is the availability. Again, customers cannot get 24 hours power supply now. There is no doubt about that. In some areas, yes. In some areas, no. That is clear.
Where do you have 24 hours? No, let's just leave that one.
No, we can't leave it out, sir. In areas where customers are on tier 3 kV, some of them get up to 24 hours per supply.
Okay.
Let me just deal with the second part, which is the issue of why can't discos provide meters? Again, it goes to the issue of liquidity in the sector, which Dr. Amadi and Professor Oke have dealt with very well. It goes to the issue of liquidity. And that's why, even with CAPME, the discos were not providing the money directly. What discos were doing was to refund the
his explanation, your initial explanation when he talked about politics and economics of power supply.
Yes,
that is where the problem is. Because when you talk about liquidity, you see, you are in business. You are supposed to acquire these meters for your customers to use them to, of course, facilitate payment back to you as a company. It's a whole lot of risk. I agree with you. Now, let me tell you what happened in Enugu briefly. Enugu area, where discos, they say, okay, we are withdrawing all the old meters that you are using, over 400,000 pieces of them. I happen to be using that for over 10 years now. It's okay, you want to recall all of them, we are going to reissue you fresh meters. Meanwhile, you're going to pay that 9,000 naira for one phase, 79,000 naira for three phase. Now, it will take about 3 months before you get that. In the interim, you will be getting estimated bill, which is what led to the almost crisis in that zone. Now it has been resolved. They have reverted to what it used to be. Because they gave a reason that some meters, if you maybe buy a credit like 5,000 naira, it could last 5 months or something. Like some meters, have faults or what have you. If that is the case, you should be able to apply some technology to determine the meters that are going bad. You replace them. Not to say you recall 400,000 pieces and put many families, on a estimated bill. And for me, it's not good business. And whatever reason that they have, in doing so, they should know that, look, business is risk. Right. And if you don't provide a meter, you say, I will pay, wait for 3 months to get it, and you're giving me that, there's some kind of, distrust in this. We're going to come back to you.
Okay.
But we'll have, Nigerians reacting to comments. So let's read them out. There are tweets, many of them here with us this morning, Kingsley.
Ibrahim Modu Ajit, privatization didn't solve the power problem in Nigeria, rather it hiked the tariff. There's an urgent need to review the subsequent, I take that again, there's an urgent need to review with subsequent revocation.
Comrade Alhaji Ngara, government should revoke the power sector from companies and back to NEPA.
Akeju Olagbaju, the word privatization has no place in modern development. Commercialization of the power sector by allowing private companies to generate, distribute, and sell the power to retailers is the model used and can work. The tight with regulation of the power sector must be relaxed.
Francis Obi said this is necessary to address the questions being asked by discos, gencos, and consumers so as to make the power sector more efficient and remove all grey areas.
Silvanus, we are aware that the private sector was privatized. In every zone or region, there's a private company in charge of operations, PHCN, and so on. So, what manner of privatization are we talking about here? I don't think I quite understand what.
Yes, Law Alpha C says the partial privatization of the power sector is the reason this critical area of the economy has paralyzed. Urgent review is necessary. The private companies have enriched themselves with the selfish status quo. Hence, the urgent needs to stop this wanton extortion.
This is coming from Muhammad Iyamida. It says, reviewing the privatization of the power sector is long overdue, considering the fact that the privatization has not solved the problem of inadequate electric supply nationwide.
Chris Simeon, Nigeria's power sector has been privatized for many years now, and the consumers have not felt the impact of the power. Now, will the proposed new review of privatization of Nigeria's power sector bring about constant supply of electricity 24/7? The estimated bill or billing PSCN is given to electricity consumers normally demands high charges. I hope the proposed review will address this issue of high tariff.
Titus Mondenok, I think the gencos are trying, but the problem lies in evacuating the product to the end users. shoddy and sharp practices take place, and most equipment haven't been upgraded. More so, some customers try to cut corners. Something needs to be done.
Now, Delajak Solomon said, while private sector capital can and should play a very important role in the future development and growth of this market, no further substantial investments will be made in this sector as it currently stands unless substantial changes are made. It is therefore imperative for the real life situation as power sector privatization in Nigeria has only succeeded in entrusting the collective wealth of the people in the hands of few elites.
Okay, now we have this coming from Badamasi Adamu. It tweets in part, it said there is a need for a level playing field for more competent investors to come into the industry. Also, the regulatory body needs to check the excesses of the new distribution companies by regulating tariffs and quality services.
Sani Michael Omokoji said, before some of us were giving birth to Nigeria, was talking about privatization, even to come before that of telecom sector. But many years down the line, the privatization is trending on air. Is telecom sector now looking more effective? Why can't we do same to power sector?
Bashiru, there is need to revisit the issue. First, privatization was not well designed. Second, discos are not investing to expand existing infrastructure as they are only interested in distributing to those who can pay. Third, a lack of regulatory capacity to monitor compliance.
Okay, Wadiyobu Dubem, he says the privatization of Nigerian power sector is one of the greatest mistakes our leaders have made. The private companies are eating what they didn't work for. It's better to move back to NEPA we had before now with money pumped into it, and NEPA can manage it better.
Adinoye Abdul Mutalib tweets, I believe your guests in the studio should also know that the same AEDC, that is Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, that brings highly inflated bill to consumers in the mode of estimated billing is still with us.
In the Jesit Michael, state governments should be allowed to generate their own power and in return pay tax to federal government.
I was just saying, Fadipe, let's get your closing thoughts now before we go over to Dr. Yemi. Okay, what is the problem with recapitalization by the discos, using Abuja disco for instance? Why can't you attract more capital, either through the capital market or through, relinquishing part of your equity?
No, the issue of recapitalization, again, we deal with what Dr. Amadi and Professor Yemi Oke had always mentioned. So it's not a question of the current owners not interested in making sure that energy is delivered to the people. It's a matter of, okay, who is interested? What are the policy frameworks that will allow these new investors to come in? It's those ones are within the framework of policy designs that will allow all of those things to happen. For instance, the 40% of government, what does government want to do with it? Government is still there through BPE, so they are still part of it. NEC is still involved in the regulatory framework of the power sector. So it's not as if government is not there. Government is there, and it's a matter of the policy that will be designed to bring about all of these.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's return to Professor Yemi Oke in Lagos. Be very brief here. Let's get your final thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think also we need to be fair to the discourse. People are not also addressing the issue of meter bypass. 30% of their earnings are lost to meter bypass. It is criminal to consume electricity and not pay, and as much as it is illegal to pay for what you have not consumed, because the discourse also cannot be asking consumers to pay without supplying them electricity. Let me also mention something, the parting comment of Dr. Amadi as to options. Of course, what he was trying to talk about was actually the model I suggested, talking about concession grid. Just call Siemens and GE, come generate 10,000 megawatts, run it, sell it, give them the kind of model to run that. So as against asking them to come and sell West in Nigeria. Holistically, we need to maximize power generation in Nigeria beyond the conventional gas and hydro. power is something that could be generated from virtually everything. In northern areas where we have sunshine, you could do solar. In Jos area and other areas that are naturally wind turbine, you can have wind energy. In Lagos and other areas where we have a lot of waste, we can do biomass. In Namibia and other countries, they're generating electricity from forests called debushing, as against our own Sambisa forest that is used for tourism. So,
well, Professor Ebioke, we thank you so much. Perhaps we may have the opportunity of bringing you back on this program.
Mr. was talking about terrorists. Terrorists don't generate electricity.
Yeah, well, at this point,
tension.
Exactly. At this point, we'd like to appreciate both of you for being here. Professor Yemioke, thank you so much for being part of our show this morning. And of course, the General Manager of the Corporate Communications Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, Oyebude Fadigbe. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. I would like to thank you for being with us. We are back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, have a lovely day. I'm King